Well, it's good to be here, and just to point out, you're participating in your personal capacity as a Democrat. So I'm going to do something I haven't done in a long time, and just call you Pete, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Or we could do mayor, secretary.
That works? Yeah.
Mayor.
Let's just stick with Pete. Let's keep it
Pete,
simple.
let's do it.
Afternoon, everybody.
Yeah. It's a pretty good turnout. Yeah. You know, I was reflecting kind of on your political journey here to this moment, and thinking about how much Chicago as a city has played a role in your biography. I mean,
Yeah.
you worked here, you interned as a news
That's right,
investigative news person here in Chicago after college.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having all these memories and flashbacks right now. I mean, when I was a little kid, I formed my concept of what a big city was coming to Chicago. Every now and then, we'd drive up from South Bend for a day trip. I'd get to go to the Science and Industry Museum, and my dad would disappear into Powell's bookstore, 57th Street Books in Hyde Park. And, that was the first time I really kind of got a sense of what a city of this size is like. And then in college, back when I thought I was maybe going to be a journalist, got an internship at Channel 5 with amazing investigative reporter, Renee Ferguson was her name. It's actually her birthday today, if she's following along. And that was a great opportunity to get to know what investigative reporters know best, which is the kind of underbelly of a city that famously has a lot to look at under the hood. And then my first real job, my first steady job anyway, out of grad school was here. Lived right in the Loop before a lot of people were living and socializing in the Loop after hours. And then Chicago that was where I usually came for military duty. I see one of the people that I drilled with in my Navy unit, which was out of Fort Sheridan. And most importantly, Chicago is the place that brought me and Chasten together. I was on this dating app, not that one, and spotted this guy. He was a grad student at DePaul, and had a side job helping students, exchange students, find their way around O'Hare. And started chatting with him one day. Then we met, and I actually proposed to him at O'Hare at Gate B5 years later. So don't let anybody tell you O'Hare is not romantic. Every time I come here, I just feel the energy and the complexity of a big city. So one of the reasons I've felt, even though I can't claim to be a Chicagoan, I felt a little bit motivated to defend Chicago against some of the attacks that are coming from the other side, who seem to want to attack an entire city as part of their response to the convention being here. This is a great city, and like every city faces its challenges, but it's one of the cities that really propelled America's arrival into modernity. Back when this was the West, by the way, really, that Chicago's rise came at a time when this was still kind of a far out part of the country, and it's just really exciting to be here.
Yeah, you have a certain facility with the pen, I think, as we learned from your memoir and from your speech last night, which I'm told you finished up not long before you went on stage.
Yeah. It's just hard to. It's hard to know when to put the pen down. So I was kind of tweaking and thinking of a couple things I'd want to say a little bit differently. And it's a challenge, right? They give you a few minutes. You have so many things that you want to say. And every time you send a draft, they let you know how you could cut it in half, which is their job, right, to keep things moving. But part of what I've enjoyed and what I've tried to be part of is how every speaker, I think, sought to say things that they specifically could say, or they specifically could speak to. And I tried to do the same thing. And what a thrill to be out there on that stage and to feel this electric energy. I mean, I do a lot of public speaking, obviously, but I felt a shiver up my spine toward the end just from the response of the crowd. And that's the energy the Democrats will need to bottle up at the end of this convention after what I'm sure will be another electrifying night, and take with us for what will be a long 2.5 months of campaigning. But I think the propulsion coming out of this will really stay with us.
Yeah. What is reaction? I mean, have you heard from people close to you? What's reaction been like to your speech?
Oh yeah, people have been wonderful. Yeah, getting wonderful messages and notes, which is really encouraging, and obviously what you hope for when you give a big speech on a big stage. But of course, the most important thing is it's not about me. So what I most want to hear is people saying that this has contributed to their motivation to stay involved and do everything that they can to make sure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and all the other Democrats on the ticket this year get elected.
I want to go back in time to the end of July. You're on a plane from a fundraiser you did with Vice President Harris in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and you're on a plane. It's a Sunday. You land. You open your phone and you see President Biden's X post. What happens next? Take us kind of inside your thinking.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that happened was not much because they didn't have a gate ready for us at the airport. And so we were on the tarmac for a good 20 minutes or so before we pulled in and then headed home as we had planned to do. Our kids didn't particularly know or care that something important was going on politically. So part of what we were focused on was just getting settled back with the kiddos. But I knew that it was a moment when any Democrat had to think about what we had to contribute, what we could offer to help bring the party together. Got a hold of the vice president within a matter of hours, let her know that I wanted to do everything I could to support her, and made that public that same evening.
And what did she say to you that instantly made you think she has this? She is the candidate our party needs to go with.
Well, she immediately talked about, just to be clear, I didn't call her to decide whether to support her. I called her so she knew that I was supporting her. She talked about how we all needed to do this together and how it was something that had happened very quickly, but was going to mean that we would have no time to lose to make sure that there was victory in November. And one of the things I thought was amazing about that afternoon and that evening is, let's face it, Democrats are not exactly known for quickly and easily aligning around anything or anyone. We tend to get to consensus the hard way after a lot of push and pull and tug of war. So the fact that the party coalesced so quickly around her, I think, reflects so well on her leadership, as well as, I think, reflecting the sense of seriousness of purpose that Democrats have right now.
You are one of the very few people here who know Vice President Harris as a competitor, as a one-time competitor in the 2020 primary. What have you noticed about her rise from that moment to this moment right now? Have you noticed, political growth in her from a former candidate to now a candidate for the top of the ticket?
Well, yeah, it's true. The first I got to know her was when she and I and about 20 other people were competing for the presidential nomination. And it says a lot when you come to appreciate and respect someone that much more when you are competing. But that's definitely how I felt about her and many other among the people that we were competing with. Then I had the privilege of working with her on debate prep. They invited me to represent Mike Pence and help her prepare for some of the things Mike Pence would say. You can imagine what it was like for me trying to enter the mental space of trying to become Mike Pence, but I said I'll do anything for a good cause. And but of course, through that, had a chance behind the scenes to see how she honed her arguments, how she gathered the facts and information that she wanted to have ready in order to have the best possible debate performance. And she had a superb debate performance. I might have been one of the only people since I was in the auditorium up in the rafters who had no idea about this fly that landed on his head that stole the show, but was so proud of her performance. And then, of course, have had a chance to see her as vice president. A job as visible as the vice presidency, I mean, the American vice presidency is one of the most visible leadership jobs in the world, would make a profound mark on anyone. And I have seen how in that role, she's had a chance to demonstrate qualities that you don't get to show when you're one of many competitors for a nomination or even just on the campaign trail. I think she's been able to show that sense of command on the world stage. I had the privilege of sitting right next to her while she was engaging world leaders at one of the summits that was hosted in Washington. See behind the scenes just how she poses the question that brings a meeting to the real point of the meeting quickly. And what I love about this moment is that I think even though America has known her as our vice president, of course, for almost 4 years, America is understanding her as a leader in a way that's just only visible when somebody becomes the top of the ticket.
You spoke of the world stage, and so I have to ask, do you want to be her next U.S. ambassador to the UN?
I'm not applying for a job right now or measuring the drapes on anything. I've got, I already have, I can't talk about it in this context, but as you know, I have a day job that I love. Between that and doing everything I can to get her elected, that's taking approximately 130% of my time and talents. And then afterwards, we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, I do want to stay on this thread a little bit of world affairs. It's a fraught moment on the global stage right now. You were at a fundraiser here in Chicago not too long ago for Harris, and there was a woman there who posted about the interaction that she had with you. Her name was Nabila Rashid, and she came very skeptical to this fundraiser. She posted that she doesn't feel like she has been heard. She disagrees with the administration's policy on Gaza, and she asked you a question. And she said that your answer blew her out of the water after the fact. And she said you gave a 7-part, nuanced, thoughtful sort of reconstruction of what you think should happen. Could you share with us a little bit that answer that you gave her?
No pressure. Jeez.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can reconstruct that interaction. I do remember speaking with her, and I remember seeing in her eyes something that I've seen in so many interactions that we've had with people who are so concerned and in so much anguish about what's going on. And I think the first step is to understand that people are coming to this issue so often from a place of pain. This is not one of those things that people track as a matter of political sport. People feel very real pain from witnessing the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. People are also feeling a huge amount of pain associated with a surge in anti-Semitism in the United States, including on campus, that has accompanied the response to what is going on in the news. And I think what we need right now is leadership that can comprehend the complexity of what is notoriously one of the most confounding issues in the world and has been for as long as we've been alive. And part of what I appreciate about Kamala Harris is her ability to speak to the need for an end to the suffering and the killing in Gaza without saying anything that could be taken as making an excuse for Hamas, and speaking to the legitimate security needs of the Israeli people and the United States' relationship with Israel, without doing or saying anything that is making excuses for all of the choices of Netanyahu. And that kind of nuance doesn't go onto a bumper sticker. It doesn't always make it into a tweet. But that is exactly the kind of understanding that needs to be brought to this fiercely challenging and painful issue. And I do see that kind of leadership in our vice president. I think it's part of what's going to make her a great president.
Sounds like somebody who's preparing to be an ambassador to the UN.
Dude, you got my future all figured out here.
I do want to ask about the Veep stakes. Reuters reported that Friday, before she made her decision, that you had a 90-minute meeting with her. Did that happen?
I'm pretty sure, I never saw this written down, but I'm pretty sure that the first rule of the VP process is you don't talk about the VP process. Other than to say, I really am excited about Tim Walz. I have seen campaigns and parties spend millions of dollars on trying to make their candidate seem like the kind of guy who would be a National Guardsman and a football coach and a school teacher. He literally is that guy. What you see is what you get. And America saw that last night in a way that I think has really endeared them to him and to the ticket.
I do want to ask you about Walz, but just the general tone of this convention as well. You once called Trump a draft-dodging chicken hawk during your run for the DNC, but you later wrote about that while true, the statement was not in keeping with how I publicly speak about political figures or anyone else. And afterward, you reflected that you said the president was inspiring a loss of decency, not just in his supporters, but also in those of us who opposed him. Have you noticed that this convention, do you think the President Obama's sort of hand gesture joke at Trump's expense, or Tim Walz sort of talking about the the debunked couch story with J.D. Vance, do you think that is beneath him?
I mean, look, I still think that we are, as a whole, very much going high, not only compared to obviously the Trump-Vance campaign, but compared to the norm in presidential politics. That doesn't mean that we're completely above occasionally the temptation to tweak our opponents on things that are just crying out to be tweaked. But but look, I do think there's a lot of different levels of what's going on, right? One of which is what they are calling vibes, or what we used to call morale, which is the way it feels to be in this campaign. And I do think that overall we've done a good job as a party and as a campaign of calling people to what is highest. And that doesn't mean it's all high-minded and highfalutin. I just mean that we're speaking to what is best in people, the ability to look to the future. We're asking people to be bigger. And that's a way that we can show, and not just tell, the difference between what we have to offer and the, in my view, profound darkness that is the overall motif of the entire Trump-Vance campaign right now. Even more than it was in the Trump-Pence campaign, although that was fueled by grievance too. But at least, as I said last night, at least Mike Pence was polite. At least he added like a certain sense of sunny, I don't know, something or other, or tried to the ticket. Now it seems like they've really doubled down on the darkness.
You know, there are a lot of echoes in your political biography and J.D. Vance's political biography. You both sort of rocketed to the national stage as a result of kind of the Trump era. And, you know, a letter from Flyover Country, the Medium post that you wrote launching your DNC campaign, you know, was a lot about that. And that's why, in part, in the beginning of your political career, that you got a lot of attention was your opposition to Trump. Do you see similarities between yourself and Vance?
I think I had more similarities with him back when he was telling the truth. He did write very eloquently 4 or 5 years ago about, about how Donald Trump was appealing to the worst in us. He had a different way of putting it than I did. He referred to Donald Trump as a kind of a heroin or a kind of opioid, which, just think about how dark, if you're from Appalachia, right? That's pretty much literally the darkest thing I could imagine you saying about somebody, after what opioids have done to that part of the country, as well as the industrial Midwest where I lived. It really is, I think, the worst thing you could say about somebody, and that's what J.D. Vance eloquently described Donald Trump as. So I guess back then I might have had a little more in common with him. I think it's true that both of us have spoken to the fascination of coastal political commentators with the middle of the country and the so-called Rust Belt. But I would argue that J.D. Vance made a choice to walk away from the interests of the middle of the country when he attached himself to a president who is almost extravagantly anti-Midwestern in style and in terms of the policies. You know, the anti-union policies, the really terrible results that we had around manufacturing, the resistance to anything that would raise the minimum wage or help people get overtime. In other words, all the things that people in places like where I grew up and places where JD grew up really need. And you know, just because you live in the Midwest doesn't mean that you're embodying Midwestern values or looking out for the Midwest. And that's a contest and a contrast that I think is very much on display in the distinction, not just in style, but very importantly in policy substance, between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. Tim Walz executed a number of progressive policies that are also wildly popular in a Midwestern way. He made sure that kids can eat, no matter how poor they are, in schools in Minnesota. That has been characterized as some kind of far-out proposition. I think it is in keeping with a Midwest progressive tradition, but also just in keeping with a faith tradition that says that we need to take care of the least among us. And to me, that's somebody who is much more aligned with my understanding of what it means to meaningfully embody Midwestern values and a Midwestern political tradition than whatever it is that JD's pitching these days.
You know, I'm struck by having covered your 2020 presidential campaign. There are two words, two themes that have really, two values you might call them, that have really come to the fore over the last couple of weeks in the Democratic Party, and that's freedom, which you campaigned on significantly, and then there's also this talk of joy returning to politics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to offer a different account, not just what our policies ought to be, but what our politics ought to be like. This is what I tried to convey last night in my address. And it's not naive. I mean, it might sound weird talking about joy when we know what we're up against and we're concerned about the durability of our democracy and we've witnessed political violence on the steps of the Capitol. This call to joy is not about saying everything's fine, doesn't matter who wins, let's just go out there and have some fun. It's that even in the hardest fought battles, there is a joy in the solidarity that we build with one another. There is joy in the experience of convincing others to come along with us. I think there's real joy in persuasion. There's joy in welcome. And I've always believed in welcoming what I like to call future former Republicans into the fold, especially at a time like this, when you have a top of the Republican ticket that's walked away from so many Republican values. And I also happen to think it's generally more of a winning strategy too, because part of what you do in a campaign is try to build a campaign people want to be part of, things people want to be at, events people want to attend. And I think that's very much on display. I don't just mean in terms of crowd size, but I mean in terms of the energy and enthusiasm on display in this convention hall. That quality of pulling us in. There's just more to it than grim determination, and that's how I'd rather run a campaign. And I also think that when you try to put people in touch with a kind of joy, we become a little more open-minded and open-hearted in a way that actually leads to better policies than this idea that anyone who isn't like you is a threat and you should be small and backward-looking and fearful all the time. I think that leads to worse and more damaging policies.
It's been 7 years since you ran to be the chair of the DNC. If Kamala Harris asked you to be her DNC chair, would you do that job?
You're trying all the future job opportunities for me.
I've got one more. One more.
All right. Now I'm curious.
Michigan, where you live now, has an open gubernatorial bid in 2026.
You're my career coach now. You got all my different options laid out. I'm not just trying to be coy for political reasons. Every great opportunity I've had and everything I've done in politics that mattered probably would have been a big surprise to me just a year or two before it was happening. And that's taught me to be very humble about thinking I have the path figured out in terms of what's ahead. And I sincerely don't know what I'll be doing whenever I'm not doing what I'm doing right now.
We both have kids around the same age. Mine are a little older. And I'm curious, how have they changed the way that you think and talk about politics? We heard a little bit of that last night in the speech.
Well, as I mentioned last night in the speech, having kids has made it was one thing for me to talk about how my marriage, the most important thing in my life, exists by the grace of a single vote in the Supreme Court. It's still another when I think about now an entire family, a family unit of this amazing son and daughter and my spouse, my husband Chasten, and the life that we built, the home that we built, the world that we built. When you're with your kids, you realize that their world is whatever you make possible for them and surround them with, especially at that age. We're thinking about the fact that they're going to experience the 22nd century. They're going to know what it's like to be an American in 2100, which compels you to take a longer view of the choices we're making in policy and politics. And also, one thing I'm thinking about a lot lately is they're going to form their concept of the presidency during whichever presidency is about to begin, right? That's when they'll kind of be old enough that they'll say, who's that on TV? And I'll be like, that's the president. And they'll start to understand what that means, right? They'll turn 7 during the term of the next president. And one possibility is that our daughter will form her concept of what a president is when she looks at the news and sees a president who looks like her. And that's an incredible thing to think about. And obviously the alternative is something to think about too. Whether we agreed with or liked our presidents or not growing up, our presidents were at least plausibly people we could look up to or respect as children. And I know there's already 4 years worth of parents who've had to do this, but I really do not want to have to explain the Trump presidency to my children in any context besides that of history.
You talked about it. You talked about a darkness last night that you said has set into our politics. President Joe Biden ran on this idea that there was a battle for the soul of the nation. Was he successful in quelling that battle, or is it still sort of raging on?
Well, nobody could say that it's mission accomplished, but I do think that what he achieved was not just turning the economy around and not just getting us through the worst days of COVID. Things did change. When Chasten and I got to Washington and found a place to live, you literally couldn't approach the Capitol because there was a level of fencing around it that I hadn't seen since I was in Afghanistan. And it was there as a response to the political violence that Trump supporters had wreaked on that Capitol just a few weeks earlier. There is no question that President Biden has moved us a long way from that precipice that we were all standing on. And I think in some ways, maybe an implicit theory of the case in the way that he focused on results all the time is that if the results got better, we would be, if we were still wrestling, so to speak, as a country with each other, we'd at least be wrestling a little bit further away from the edge of the cliff. And I think that's been achieved. What has yet to be achieved, but what I very much hope to see someday, is a future where most Republicans, and I know this future is a long way off, but a future where most Republicans are as horrified by Trumpism as I am, which, by the way, is how most Republicans responded to Trumpism when it first emerged in 2015, 2016, before they decided it was their path to power. And I would like a lot of things to evolve in more that direction. I'd love nothing more than to get to a place where, when it comes to an issue like climate, for example, the fight between Democrats and Republicans was over who was doing more to solve it, not whether it's real. And on issue after issue after issue, I think we have a more normal politics that we really can get to. It's just that an important step on the way toward getting there is for the Republican Party to realize that stapling their fortunes to somebody who offends not only our values but theirs is a losing proposition.
In addition to writing your speech last night and a couple of books, I'm also told that you're a songwriter, that you have written an original song called "Bath Time is the Best Time of the Day" for your two twins, and that you sing it to them.
This is true. I don't know how that leaked. I wouldn't go so far as to say I've written it, but yeah, anything to hold their attention. Bath time is a very special part of our day, but yeah, I was trying to make it entertaining for them.
Could you sing a few bars for me?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah. Nothing good comes from anybody hearing me sing in public. That's gonna stay right by the tub.
After this convention, Kamala Harris will face off with Donald Trump and do it into a debate. That's sort of the next big marker here, leaving from Chicago. Yeah. Having done debate prep with her, what advice? Not that she needs it or is asking for, but what would you tell her about showing a contrast with Trump?
Well, the issues are on her side. The American people strongly agree with us on just about every issue. That's one of the reasons why the biggest scandal of the year for the Republican Party was actually a policy scandal, which was nothing more or less than the publication of the Trump vision in the form of Project 2025. So she starts from a position of strength. I think the key will be to deal with all of the outrageous, crazy stuff that he throws out there, especially the things that simply cannot pass without a response, and yet always come home to what she has to say. Which is not about him or about herself. It's about you. It's about us. That is her center of gravity. And my hope and expectation for the debate is that that will come through, and it'll be yet another chance to show and not just tell the difference in what America has to look forward to under her presidency compared to going back to the chaos that we knew before.
Well, Pete, thank you so much for your time. This was fun. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you.